of deconstructivist aesthetics and music, an auto-ethnography of errors, erasures, permutations, discontinuities, paradoxes, and artificial intelligence. And this is by Philon Nguyen and Eldad Sabri. So they've got a video prepared, so we'll just play the video now.
Welcome to this presentation, The Phenomenology of Deconstructivist Aesthetics in Music, Auto-Ethnography of Errors, Erasures, Permutations, Discontinuities, Paradoxes, and Artificial Intelligence. By me, Dr. Phil Nguyen, and Dr. Eldad Sabri from Audiovisual. So this is the agenda of the presentation: introduction, a few words on the aesthetics of deconstruction, an experiment, and a few concluding remarks. So one can ask oneself whether technique or creative aesthetics is the source of aesthetics. We can be reminded of the controversy in early modern music between the structural and phenomenological aspects of music creation. For example, serialism versus spectralism. This announces the age of machine learning in the arts, as recently advocated by critics such as Loughran in his book, where deep neural networks are often created as black boxes beyond the usual grasp of human intelligence. We argue that a certain exception of machine learning aesthetics leads to a deconstructivist aesthetics in music. We'll talk about what that means. And this work stems from a research creation project where the objective was to write an opera based on AI techniques, basically a cherry poker demodernization. So the aesthetics of deconstruction. And architecture deconstructivism has effectively developed an aesthetics of breaking straight lines. So here you see works by Daniel Libeskind and Peter Eisenman, two architects. In music, the straight line is analogous to chord progressions, so well-ordering musical events. This is about combinatorial aesthetics. It dates back to Tristan Zara's instructions in his How to Make a Dead Edge poem. This is a poem here by Brian Jackson, who was a poet expelled by the Surrealist group, and was a friend of William Burroughs, with whom he developed the so-called combinatory poetry movement. So I am that I am, a bunch of permutations of the sentence. Erasure aesthetics. John Cage wrote this piece here. It's based on a piece by William Billings, and he erased parts of the score to give this combinatory aesthetics or erasure aesthetics. There are more deconstructivist aesthetics in my paper. You can actually read the paper. So here's an experiment using deconstructivist music. So we use a GAN to generate music. This is an excerpt where the 31st seconds, the family is in the cherry orchard, they're enjoying the day. At the 30th second, there's an A minor chord, and then the music starts becoming very disjointed. It was generated by AI, and it corresponds to the point where a peasant who was named by a mine appears on stage. So this is what it sounds like. So let's have a few concluding words. Deconstructivist architect Tom Main talks about combinatorial sketching to explain his use of AI in architectural generative design. So he used AI in his architectural design, and he calls the process combinatorial sketching. Mark Fisher warns us in his book about the reuse of by post-fortist capitalism or late capitalism AI processes to actually make music something like a commodified object and something alienating. So following Heidegger's chicken egg paradox, we can quote Yang Lee's poem. Here it is. Now, what is poetry? If you say that it is simply a matter of words, I will say that a good poet gets rid of word. If you say it is simply a matter of meaning, I will say a good poet gets rid of meaning. But you ask, without words and without meaning, where is the poetry? To this I reply, get rid of words, you get rid of meaning, and still there's poetry. So what happens if we get rid of humans in musical processes? There's still music. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Music AI's Potential Impact, Scoping the Terms of the Debate About Value from Oliver Brown.
Hello everyone. Great to be here. I've come from UNSW in Sydney, Australia. And this paper is an attempt, it's part of a project that I'm involved in, which is an EU-funded project called Critical Interdisciplinary Studies in Music and AI, which brings together music AI practitioners, but also sociologists and critical theorists. And I've got a background more as a music AI practitioner, but increasingly becoming interested, like a large wave of people, I think, in critical aspects as well. So I wanted to capture some of the debates that are in the air around music and AI in terms of frameworks that that can help inform and structure the way we think about this. So the purpose of this paper is quite simple, really. It's just to look at drawing on some literature that helps us structure those debates. Here's an example. These are Twitter comments on a particular person posting their recent music AI innovation in text to audio. Some people may know who this is. Who the original poster is. And I think most people in this room would be familiar with this sort of sentiment. For example, Minnie says, hey, could you make AI that does things people actually don't want to do, like taxes, instead of ruining things we actually enjoy and what makes us human, such as creative things. We're in a very interesting world. All of us in this room are interested and probably proactively interested in where we can go with music and AI. And there are people who are interested in or who are very concerned and find that very confrontational. So I won't go through all of these comments, but I think they're familiar to people. So I particularly draw on quite an old piece of work. Sorry, the date's not here. It's either 2001 or 2004. McCarthy et al. A work commissioned by the RAND Corporation, which looks at arts funding. And produces this analysis of the value of the arts in society according to a framework which, unfortunately you can't see the top there, it's instrumental benefits at the top, intrinsic benefits at the bottom, and then private and public as a spectrum. I found this very, very helpful, insightful framing of how we might think about the value of the arts. And the paper goes through many of these elements in detail, and I don't have time to do that in this very short 5 minutes, which I've probably already used up. But I cherry pick some of these and I work through examples. I look at a handful of examples, including the recent debate around Nick Cave and his fan who sent him a ChatGPT generated song. Nick Cave's response is, this is not human, this is not the blood and guts business of songwriting, and it never will be. Those comments you saw earlier as another case study, and the views of artists such as Portrait XO and others who are more interested in the experimental dimensions, much like CJ demonstrated so perfectly. So this boils down to some analysis about these different categories of benefits in the arts. Particularly the focus of my interest in this paper is cognitive growth, which is one of the categories that McCarthy and et al. Propose, and just seeking to observe and tease out the idea that cognitive growth seems to be a point of division for attitudes towards the value or the negative value of AI in music. So for some, it's eroding and undermining our capacity for music to engage us in cognitive growth, and for others, again, as CJ perfectly presented, it can be something that it empowers and enables. Other areas include livelihood of musicians, evidence that AI would undermine the stimulation of musical diversity and quality, and some of these are less controversial, such as the latter. And again, I can't see that and you can't see that, but a special case of interest was the academic evidence that instrumental performance can have instrumental benefits to well-being. And that's something that AI may be considered to erode, but actually it's also something that's been under erosion from electronic music for a considerable amount of time and is an established conversation. All done, thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up we have Caring Trouble and Musical AI, considerations towards a feminist musical AI from Kelsey Cotton and Tatar.
Hello everyone, my name is Kelsey and going to be presenting the paper written with Kıvanç, Caring Trouble and Musical AI. We're both from the west coast of Sweden, based at Chalmers University of Technology, and we'd like to acknowledge the funding support from the Marcus and Marianne Wallenberg Foundation. So this paper, the title at least, is presenting a kind of an interesting conundrum. Caring trouble, what is that? How can those two concepts exist together? So there's a little bit of a theoretical layering. It's kind of like an onion, caring trouble. Trouble is connecting to Donna Haraway's notion of a socio-technological assemblage, which is our connection between a human and a non-human agent taking place within a sort of a more universal concept of a world. So the act of troubling something is to be able to look critically at the connections between the human and the non-human and those wider connections between the world more generally. So how can we do this with care? Well, care is a concept that's coming from Della Bella Casa and is attending to the becomings of matters of fact and matters of concern. So you can see where this theoretical onioning is coming through here. So fact and concern is coming from Bruno Latour. A fact is the objective, literal, the factual, and concern is what happens to those matters of fact when they're placed into a different context. How do those interactions unfold? How are things connected together? So this notion of caring trouble that we're working with is how do we look very critically at the connections between things whilst attending to how they came to be. So how does all of this connect to music and AI and musical AI? There's been a lot of discussions already today on some of the pressing concerns or the troubles that we're all dealing with within our research work. So the why of how to apply this caring trouble to the work that we do within music is primarily centered on how can we work in a better way to actually be able to look at how things are connected and the choices that we are making in our usage of models in the choices that we're making in how we're processing data sets, and also how we're actually curating all of this in the construction of music, the presentation of music. So there's lots of interconnected layers in what we're doing as musicians, as programmers, as coders, as creators, and a lot of these decisions have implications in the real world that we need to examine. Which leads to some theoretical perspectives pertaining to data ethics, and specifically we are drawing from CARE data principles and feminist data ethics from Carroll et al. And Gray and Witt. So there's a couple of different aims and intentions that are connected and sort of at the forefront of our paper, which the emojis are very helpful in communicating. So the first is that we are conducting a preliminary examination in how feminist data ethics, care ethics, and feminist science and technology studies may help to inform the critique and evaluation of musical AI artworks. So that's the first emoji line. The second one is how we can then use these principles and methods to develop a scaffolded analytical method to be able to conduct this critique, so that we may be able to more acutely examine the connections between how is the model working, how is this interacting with the data set, what are the things that we're seeing, and how all of this is being presented in the world. And then we applied this to a case study, specifically the Hollyplus voice model, to be able to look at how there are some really interesting things that are happening with the artistic intentionality of that artwork, and some considerations that have been made with the technical implementation that we found during our application of this particular framework revealed a lot of really interesting tensions in what's visibilized and invisibilized at various points throughout that artwork's creation, and in the presentation of it on the web platform, and also in the interaction of a person using that voice model. Oh, that's really sad. One of the emojis is not showing up. So what does this framework look like? Essentially, we put it together in sort of like a guitar pick structure. So you can start primarily from any point. We started from a very particular point. So on the screen here, we have at the very bottom the 12 implosion dimensions from Haraway. I'll have on the next slide what those dimensions are that we used. We have the CARE data principles. One of the bubbles is for data, one's for people, one's for purpose. And then we have the 5 interventionist principles from feminist data ethics from Gray and Witt. So we started with our methodology with the implosion dimension and examining the structure of the Hollyplus model from all of these categories individually, and then connecting them together. Now, this approach of examining each sort of theme that we are using with Haraway, with the CARE, and with feminist data ethics, looking at each aspect individually in relation to the model, and then connecting them all together. So it was quite an intensive process, but brought out some really, really fascinating things with regards to the voice model, which we've identified as our matters of concern. So that's the contextual connections of the voice model to other aspects. So the primary things that we identified that were of particular interest were how data and identity are navigated in the presentation of the voice model, the things that the creator Holly Herndon is particularly concerned about in the management of data and who owns it, their identity as well as a vocalist, and how they can encourage a collective sharing of voice and voicehood. There were also really interesting things pertaining to the management of the Hollyplus DAO, which is the sort of the fiscal structure around the minting of artworks that are made using the Hollyplus voice model, and the sort of the reclamation of one's agency and control over data. And the third is legacy, because this voice model ultimately has a sort of a what happens after you die and how people can use your voice for good sort of mindset to it, how that can actually be navigated in the real world. So there were lots of really interesting findings and tensions that we found as a result of applying our framework to that case study. So this is essentially what it looks like, a very nice looking guitar pick or a circuit board with lots of lovely little boxes with lots of words on them. So we're presenting this as an approach to being able to evaluate and critique an artwork. So if we just block out some of the bits that we've had that are applicable to our particular work, we're imagining that this could be used as a framework to be able to evaluate a musical artwork, to be able to, and it's a shame that the Zoom bar is in the way, but to identify the matters of concern of the endpoint of that artwork, how it is in the world, what are the things that need to be highlighted, and hopefully something that can be used by others in the evaluation of their artworks or to help inform the construction process of what they make. I think that's my 5 minutes, so thank you very much, and I look forward to discussing in the poster session. And I like mail, so there's my email address if anyone wanted to get in touch.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. So next up we have YouTube Mirror, an interactive audiovisual installation based on cross-modal generative modeling by Sihwa Park.
Hello, I'm Sihwa Park, assistant professor at York University, Canada. Today I'm talking about my work, YouTube Meter, which is currently being on display at ACCA. So please take a moment to experience in person, which will be also disassembled tonight. So. YouTube Meter is an interactive audio-visual installation that is based on cross-modal generative model that learned the implicit relationship between images and corresponding sounds extracted from the same videos I watched on YouTube. It is also an artistic attempt to represent the world through the lens of a machine that learned this association. Let me talk about first data. From my YouTube watch history from 2018 to 2022, which you can see the left side on the screen, I downloaded about 6,000 videos as a 1 second long clips. For all the clips, a 100 millisecond sound segment of each video was also extracted, converted to a MEL spectrogram. A representative image frame of each segment also selected based on sound onset event detection. YouTube Meter uses a cross-modal generative modeling architecture based on variational autoencoders with associators, which is originally proposed by Joe and his colleagues. The training involves 2 steps. The first is intramodal training. In this step, there are 2 VAEs being trained. One is for an image, which you can see at the top. The other is for sound, you can see at the bottom. The second step is cross-modal association. In this step, an associator at the center is trained with these 2 VAEs, previously trained in the first step. Here, the associator is also a VAE, but its goal is to map and associate between these 2 latent spaces of the 2 VAEs. For example, with an image to sound associator, you can generate a sound given from an image input. YouTube meter aims to let the audience see themselves through the machine-generated images and sound. For this goal, it represents the machine's output in the form of an interactive meter. YouTube meter was presented at the Media Arts and Technology Program end of year in 2022 at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Overall, the real-time interactivity of YouTube meter enabled the audience to navigate the latent space of the model with their own body, having multisensory cross-modal experience. As an empirical case study, this project demonstrated the potential for utilizing cross-modal generative modeling in interactive audiovisual art. However, there are some limitations that can be further developed. First is that the generated images are too much generalized across the entire data set because of no labeling or no categorizations of the data. The second, the generated sounds also are not that distinctive according to different images. It is partly because of the small lengths of audio samples in both training and reconstruction. Since it is only using an image-to-sound associator, the different configurations for the installation would be possible with sound-to-image associator. Last, it is worth considering the personalization of a model with the audience's data to have the audience more engaged with the artwork. It is funded by MAT and IHC at UCSB. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up we have Risks and Opportunities from Artificial Creativity by Roisin Loughran.
Hi everybody. So my name's Roisin Loughran. I'm from the Regulated Software Research Centre in Dundalk Institute of Technology from Ireland, and I'm here to talk about risks and opportunities from artificial creativity. This is definitely something we've been chatting about already this week at some of the workshops yesterday, and we heard quite a few points as well at the wonderful keynote that we had this morning. So just to go straight on into it, the reason I wrote this paper, I was thinking about some things, particularly at the beginning of the year. Now, we're all very familiar with OpenAI. We know how it's developed over the last few years, but something happened this year, and it was largely to do with ChatGPT. ChatGPT just made a boom for AI in what would be non-academic circles. It's become very, very mainstream. I mean, once South Park makes an episode with it, that's it. It's out there. There's no holding back. So we know that as well, okay, so this is large language models, it's text generation, and obviously we can be creative with our text. But in addition to this, there's a huge amount of more traditionally creative, like image and audio and music generative systems that have become very, very accessible and very popular. And a lot of these are open source, a lot of them are very simple to use, and that's a big, big thing. No longer do you have to have specialized knowledge to be able to use AI for music generation, right? It helps to have musical knowledge as well, but there are systems out there now that more or less let you click a button and it will make some kind of music. Whether or not it's good or not is up for debate. So obviously this is very powerful, this is very accessible, so there are some risks and there are some opportunities. So first of all, the risks. Obviously, academic plagiarism. We know this with ChatGPT, obviously, but as well, for anyone who is, has compositional courses, how are you going to make sure that students don't just generate something online if that's not what they're supposed to do and generate it? So that there's a possibility there. Anger among artists is a very big thing as well, okay? I think Ollie was kind of mentioning this as well, and it came up yesterday as well in the folk school. As an example, there's a online repository called The Session, which has a huge amount of Irish trad tunes that are submitted. And back in February, somebody submitted an AI version, and all hell broke loose in the comments. So they got very, very upset. It had to be pulled down. They had to make a rule because they were genuinely angry about this. And there is for some people, it's very upsetting to think that AI or machines can do this very creative, very human-like process that we call music generation. Plagiarism from data scraping, we talked about copyright as well earlier on. There's a big problem there, obviously. Reduced opportunities for new artists and reduction in the art workforce. Any type of automation is going to lead to some to job losses, and this is a very sad fact of automation. But in particular, this is going to affect the newer artists, okay? The likes of John Williams is probably grand, but for anyone who's working, who might be relying on small-time commissions, this kind of thing, they are really at risk of just being replaced by some free software. Detrimental biases as well. We heard a lot about feminism there, and this has been seen certainly in visual art, which when it's certain generative systems become extraordinarily sexualized when anyone female becomes involved. Might not be the case for music, but never assume that there won't be a bias until you've actually seen it happen. And identity fraud, likewise, authorship and who made what is a bit of a problem. Also, one big one as well that I should have up there as well is the ecological impact of AI. We know audio processing is very computationally expensive. You add in a load of deep learning, massive GPUs, these things create heat, okay? We need to be very, very conscious of the amount of energy we're using. There's only one planet. It's not in a great state. So I'm not saying don't do it, but be conscious of your carbon footprint there as well. But it's not all doom and gloom, okay? The flip side, and there is a flip side to most of those arguments, cost-effective content. So if you're doing a generative game and you need some music, you no longer have to go and pay the struggling artist. You can just generate music, and that's better for you. And understanding your own intelligence. Never forget that creativity is an aspect of intelligence. And by looking at this and by modeling this and by having an understanding of what's going on, we can actually understand more about ourselves. Increased accessibility and focus on talent over education is basically we're creating more of a level playing field here. No longer, like studying music for some people simply isn't accessible. It's not, some people just simply don't have the ability to go off and study music at 3rd or 4th level. And now they can actually, explore these things in their own time with free software. I mean, you can actually do a lot on your phone now even, instead of having to go off and spend a lot, like hundreds and hundreds, and not thousands of euro on courses or on software or on hardware. You can actually do quite a lot now with what's at your fingertips. And this does create a more level playing field. Stimulation creativity as well. These generative systems don't have to generate the final output. We can use them to just generate an idea and run with that. New challenges and opportunities as well. Let's not, a lot of these things are about, a lot of the problems are around people trying to pretend something is what it's not. But what if we actually said, okay, we've got the AI song contest, we've got the music generation challenge. Let's actually say this is what it is. Let's focus on what it is. Let's admit what it is, and let's try and be the best at it. And never forget that it's fun, okay? Anything that's fun and that's accessible and that we can use, I think we saw a lot there this morning about how fun this is. So this is great. So how can we try and optimize the risks and move away from optimize the opportunities and move away from the risks? I think a big part of it is evaluation, okay? I'm very interested in looking forward into this. How can we evaluate or give some kind of measure of is something genuinely created by humans or actually some kind of fraudulent version of AI? But that's future work. So as a way of looking forward, I was just thinking about this, and I was kind of thinking of the different attitudes we have towards AI. And again, we've touched on this a little, but I was trying to kind of come up with the possibilities. So we have different people with different opinions. You've got the AI optimists. They all think it's all going to be solved. There's no point having a pen anymore. AI is going to solve that. It's all great, and it can solve absolutely every problem that we've ever had. Slightly more down to earth are the enthusiasts. which is like, yay, this is great, we can do stuff, we can have loads of fun with this, we can use it to solve problems, we can have lots and lots of new ideas and keep going. On the other side, people who don't like to talk too much about it, don't really want to deal with this, I don't have to deal with this, this is just a passing fad, is slightly unrealistic. However, people who aren't that interested whatsoever, of course, we have the people who are convinced this is going to kill us all. And while, okay, Terminator maybe not, but the idea that an unchecked, unregulated AI could get into some kind of critical system and cause us all a lot of bother is unfortunately not a completely unrealistic idea. And then, of course, it's, well, okay, what are you going to do? May not have wanted to do it, but it's there now, so we're going to have to deal with it. And again, I was looking at these and I kind of thought they're a little bit negative, so I thought I'd better come out with something a little bit more, might be able to read that one, but the idea of the AI ethicists. So if we build it carefully and, I don't know, do something better, we can all work out for the greater good, okay? And I think this is actually a big thing as well. Sorry, I don't know, have I? Sorry. Yeah, so be careful and it'll all work out grand. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have now Extensible, Embodied Knowledge, Bridging Performance Practices and Intelligent Performance System Design from Lucy Strauss and Matthew Yee-King.
Hi everyone, my name is Lucy Strauss. Oh, you can't really see, but I'm at Goldsmiths University. I'm a doctoral researcher, and Matthew Yee-King is my supervisor. And our paper is entitled Extensible Embodied Knowledge, Bridging Performance Practice and Intelligent Performance System Design. So we're really kind of riffing off the theme of the conference, which is intelligent performance systems. And this is a kind of theoretical design research basis for a very particular project that I'm working on in my PhD, which is along the lines of like augmented instruments and augmented instruments and interactive systems, specifically for myself and people with similar practices to play. I'm a viola performer. And so it's in quite a specific context, but I think you can still hopefully gain something. So firstly, we started thinking a little bit more carefully about what an intelligent performance system is, and I suppose there's this movement towards a human-centered approach, and well, we in our definition of intelligent performance systems, we consider the human performing body itself to be an intelligent performance system, and then anything we design for a human to use to be an extension of that. And so we wanted to go a bit deeper into, okay, well, how can we actually make use of the human body, in this case, a trained performer's body, in design ideation and in making these systems. So we looked first at a bunch of literature in the AIMC and related communities on conceptualizations for thinking of the design as comprising not just the kind of computational AI part of what we make, but also the performers, the user's body, the movement that they make, and also any other acoustic instruments on stage. And I guess this could just expand infinitely, and you could include the audience as well in thinking of this. But I won't go into too much detail, but I'll rattle off a couple of concepts and theories, and you can come and discuss them in the paper session. So we touched on extended creativity, epistemic tools, technological bodies, configuration, and also 4E cognition, which comes from cognitive science, which is extended, embedded, inactive, and embodied cognition. And so while there are all these kind of contradictions and incompatibilities in between each of these individual concepts, for example, there's a lot of conflicting opinions about whether or not cognition needs to have a mental, like a representation of the world between, for example, inactive and I think extended cognition. All of these can be really neatly sort of understood together using dynamical systems as a metaphor. So not necessarily using dynamical systems theories, mathematics from complex systems in designing the work, but more in conceptualizing at this point in the design ideation process and allowing us to explore all these different contradictory theories in design and music practice, which is enriching for practice. And so this brings us to the question, well, if we are extending this existing dynamical intelligent performance system, what are we extending? Which is quite an important question, I thought, to answer in actually designing something. And so just as a system is designed, in the case of a trained performer, like in this work, a performer's body is also trained, and it therefore holds embodied knowledge and is already inscribed with embodied knowledge. And so we don't think of this, or it's not very useful for us to consider embodied knowledge in this case as a kind of elusive, magical type of knowledge, but to actually look at where embodied knowledge has been documented and articulates it, because a lot of music practice and pedagogy is really built on people articulating and transferring and explaining and describing embodied knowledge, and this is in performance practice literature. And so we turn to a very specific, we basically took performance practice literature, which is packaged for performers and pedagogues, and we repackaged it to help with our design process. And we use a very specific technique from viola performance, which if you want to hear about, I'll tell you later. But the technique is called re-pull, and it originates in the upper back muscles. So it's something that maybe someone watching wouldn't be very aware of, but for a performer, this is a very important kind of movement that has a lot to do with expressing different musical structure. It does have kind of mechanical implications on the instrument, which result in kind of timbral features changing, but it's really not, there's a lot of other stuff happening at the same time. So these are the dimensions of one specific mechanism. And yeah, dimension space analysis has been used mostly in this community to analyze and kind of describe different performance systems to compare them, but we found it, but actually what's happened is that designers have often made their own dimension spaces to help their design process, and so we decided to do that. Oh, and we've left 2 axes free to extend the system. So these are all the existing dimensions that we thought were most important about re-pull, but you could add whatever other dimensions there to imagine how re-pull could be extended using AI. And this is my email address that you maybe can't see. There it is. It's the end.
Thank you you so much. Finally on the program we have the A and AIMC from Thor Magnusson.
No, I forgot I was presenting in this session. But I don't have any slides because I've got a bit of I was in a playful mood when I wrote that paper, and I can it's calm. Sorry? Org, of course. Yeah, I was, there was this period of strikes here in the UK, and here's my paper. And I was thinking about the kind of cultural context of our work, the kind of the cultural theory, and we've had quite good presentations today already on that. But kind of critical theory on AI and what are the concepts that we are using. And I had been joking with my lab members quite a lot that we tend to use all these A words. They were always like anthropomorphism, you know, or agency, or authenticity, and I kept talking about these A words that kept popping up. So I thought, yeah, it's almost like a bunch of A words that is almost like the A in AIMC. And this is also a joke, kind of referring to the 9 papers, you know, the conference, the 9, and there's the paper kind of tradition of the N in 9, the I in 9, the M in 9, the E in 9. These are all very interesting papers. They're kind of critically looking at what the community is doing and so on. So I was feeling a bit, yeah, kind of in a joyful mood and just thinking, what would happen if I write a paper called the A in AIMC, you know? Just start this tradition, and I invite you to write the I in AIMC and the M in AIMC and the C as well. You know, there are 3 papers to be written at least. And yeah, so I thought, okay, this is interesting. This is an interesting challenge, and I thought, what is that? You know, what kind of joke is this, you know, when we write a glossary of names, you know, and I set myself this task of constraint writing, tried to write only about these A words, and of course, you know, Ulipo, the tradition of writing with certain kind of algorithms, and all that is very inspiring, I think. So I was kind of looking into critical kind of dictionaries and encyclopedias and kind of yeah, kind of collections of texts that deal with concepts in different ways, and that can be quite interesting. So I write a little bit about that here, and then I just start with this lexicon and go through a lot of A words, and the whole paper is just the A words on stuff like agency, actor, assemblage, adaptive, authorship, authenticity, appropriation, autonomy, automation, aura, affect, algorithm, anthropomorphism, anthropocentrism, autopace. I'm enjoying this, you can hear that. Apparatus, A-life, augmentation, animism, art, anthropology, attention, aesthetics, analog. Oh, yeah, I have to stop. But I tried to kind of course, it's a short paper, so it's almost like this is a little kind of view, a little lens into a possible world of critical kind of approach to apply critical theory on the field that we're working in order to kind of have other tools, because we're all dealing with the ethics of AI. What are we doing? The aesthetics, the whole kind of science and technology situation of what is really happening. Are we determined by the technology, or are we kind of, are we victims of it, or are we really active agents with freedom within it? So I think we can learn a lot from cultural theory and philosophy and so on, and of course many of you are already doing that. But this paper was kind of a playful approach to just playing with these A words and apply little kind of snapshots into theoretical potential. So yeah, it's kind of a joke, and it was so much of a joke that I didn't even feel the possibility of writing a PowerPoint for it and presenting it here today. But yeah, I think it's a fun paper, and I hope you read it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so next up we have the Alt-AIMC papers. So first of all, we have a paper that's called Are We Solving the Wrong Problems and Are We Doing Harm in the Process? This is Anna-Kaisa Kaila, Andrei Holzapfel, and Bob Sturm. We've got a video for this one, but they've said that Bob Sturm will be around in the paper session. There he is. So he can answer the questions on this paper.
My name is Anna-Kaisa, and I'm going to...
Do we have a technical support team? Oh, here we go. Just loading. Okay, perfect.
My name is Anna-Kaisa, and I'm going to pose a provocative question. Where is the value in using AI to generate music? Are there any benefits to building systems that hardly anyone would use to create music of questionable quality that no one ever wants to listen to? Can these systems be outright harmful to music? Let's take Bob Sturm's Loughran as an example. It is a neural network that modeled symbolic sequences of music, and it was trained with a dataset of more than 23,000 transcriptions of Irish traditional dance music, downloaded from a crowdsourced database, the session.org. The system essentially generates tunes imitating and sometimes plagiarizing those it has seen. Using Irish traditional music for this purpose was, of course, convenient. There's enough data available and it is in stable format. The structure of the tunes is consistent and they are not too long for the RNN models in general. Most of the repertoire is in public domain already, so there's no headache about copyrights. And there are many practitioners of this tradition around the world to ask for feedback. But why does the world need Loughran and its endless stream of limitations? It does not provide any direct value for the users of the session.org, and they did not ask for it. In fact, they were never asked for permission for any of this, nor did they ever receive any direct compensation for it. The fact that there has not been wider material interest in engaging with the community website of Loughran speaks for itself. The service has not found a tangible, meaningful purpose for the community that it, at least partially, owes its existence. From their perspective, Loughran is very much like just a solution in search of a problem. Or perhaps it is worse than that. It is harmful misuse. Exploiting data that belongs to a cultural community that has been historically repressed and using it for purposes that are not in the interests of this community sound very much like data colonialism. It creates a dangerous impression that a living music tradition can be reduced to a simple set of data points, and it trivializes the richness of the heritage and the current culture and practice. If that is not enough of reward harm for you though, we can talk about what happens when this flood of AI-generated content gets blended with the corpus of historical human-composed works. It endangers the authenticity of the traditional repertoire in ways that are not only disrespectful, but indeed harmful. We can of course choose to label the output works appropriately as AI-generated, and this will likely become the legal minimum, at least in the EU, down the line. Now we can play nice and make sure to acknowledge and thank the data source, but the traditional music communities do not use citations as currency the way we researchers do. And pointing out to the data source can actually make it worse if it attracts more naive use of that original data. Considering all of this and more, I propose we should seriously think about what responsibilities music AI researchers have towards the music communities and the people whose data we are so happy to capitalize on. We should keep our eyes and ears open to make sure there is also musical and cultural value to these systems, and not just assume there is. This provocation is a result of an ongoing academic dialogue and debates within our interdisciplinary team at KTH. It has been at times frustrating and complicated, but it has presented us with opportunities to rethink what are and could be the benefits and the harms of doing research in this domain. Our conclusion so far is to keep the value and purpose at the core of the research and stay vigilant of our assumptions at every step of the way. But work is far from done. For this reason, I encourage you and all of us to keep having these difficult and uncomfortable conversations, both here at the conference and beyond. Bob Stone will be attending the poster session on our behalf, and he will be happy to continue the debate with you there. Thank you so much for your attention.
So finally, we now have beyond mutation, how can we acknowledge symbiogenesis in evolutionary music coding from Matthias Jung.
My name is Matthias. I'm from southern Norway. I study at a university called University of Agder. It's my PhD I'm doing there. It's mainly in participatory systems, so we're looking into audience participation and have been running a couple of concerts, research concerts, mainly in the realm of chiptune genre. And we have been developing some tools for the audience to interact with musical parameters. But lately we have been also working a little bit more towards genetic algorithms. And that brings me to this paper where I try to offer some alternative ways to think about genetic algorithms and how we could use them for audience participation. So, should I start this? Oh, you can see that all right. Yeah. Okay, so you're all familiar, I'm guessing, what a genetic algorithm is. Let's just briefly remind ourselves what it actually does. So the initial population, you see to the left, usually represented by melodies, but it could be also timbres or other musical parameters, which are then fed through crossover and mutation operators that are finally selected by a fitness function. And that fitness function for performance usually is influenced or trained, so to say, by human evaluation, which is usually also a bottleneck in genetic algorithms. But if you have like many individuals in an audience, you can kind of solve that bottleneck, and that makes it work better in that way. But the theoretical background of this whole genetic algorithms obviously is Darwinistic principle of natural selection. So the last step is always to keep the individuals that are fittest or most adaptive to change and leave out the other ones. But in biology, there is this principle of natural selection has been, let's say, criticized, also complemented by theories that actually have proven valid in explaining other main drivers in evolution. And that brings me to the principle of symbiosis and also symbiogenesis. So let me just shortly explain what's the difference here. So symbiosis would be more like a short-term collaboration, you might say, amongst different species. And they're usually categorized in three forms. So that is parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism. Parasitism, it's one species kind of feeding off the other, gaining benefit from it, and the other species being the host and not gaining anything from it. Whereas in mutualism, it's more like a back and forth kind of thing, where the one species kind of gives something and also receives something in return, such as the tree-mushroom kind of relationship that we all know. And lastly, in commensalism, it is the form that different species share their gatherings, or let's say their resources. Could be like two hunting species that share their food because they both eat a certain type of food, and then they're just sharing it. Yeah, so that's symbiosis. And on the right side, you see the concept of symbiogenesis, which is more a longer-term evolutionary principle that explains how the merging of different species turned out to what we recognize as animals, fungi, and plants. So in fact, the human eukaryotic cell is one of such mergers. If you look into mitochondria in the cells, in the eukaryotic cell, these would be formerly bacteria. So it is something that kind of evolved along the way. And yeah, that's what I found kind of interesting to throw at the genetic algorithms as we use them. And this brought me to these three main questions, I would say, that I'm currently exploring and that I wanted to share and discuss. The first one being, what are actually beneficial ways to simulate that symbiosis and symbiogenesis principles, and how can we make them creatively available, especially in an audience performer interactive setting. More specifically, how can we combine these interdependent populations, intraspecies and interspecies, to help the creative outcome. And lastly, how can we integrate like environmentally inspired concepts such as the Gaia theory, which looks more into the homeostatic equilibrium, or like the balance that the species is surrounded by. Could be like the planetary resources that we have, that also is like always in a back and forth with the development of the species themselves. Yeah, so here are my 4 suggestions that are more kind of meant to start the conversation. I didn't implement anything yet in that realm, so this is all pretty fresh ideas. But I still wanted to kind of get it started. And the first one here is to not use specifically melodies or other musical parameters as we do it usually now when in our experiments, but replace that with a thing that we call quantity of participation that points to the amount an individual in the audience is kind of engaged in the show. So how much does it interact with specific parameters? You could also kind of sum it up over the whole audience and just use their, I don't know, click rates or other groups of different audience members, such things, but mainly use that as a representation for the algorithm. Secondly, look more into the mutation operator and then implement here these prokaryotic mergers that I was talking about in the more longer term sense of symbiogenesis. And not so much use the randomly generalized mutation, which you usually do, but actually implement these principles of the mergers in the mutation. Thirdly, I was thinking we could also use the eukaryotic cell as a kind of metaphor for performance, in the sense that you have the different groups of performers and also audience members that you could see as populations that kind of go into the cell and have these relationships with each other. So the performance would be more like the nucleus in my understanding, and then you could have like different other forms of things living in a cell as different groups of performance, different groups of audience members. Yeah, and I draw that out a little bit more for your understanding on the poster. And lastly, we could also incorporate environmentally inspired theories or ideas within the fitness function, and it would be interesting to find out how we actually could implement and solve that to build some prototype around it. So yeah, here's my email address and link to my profile. I'm happy to chat also in the poster session, and the link down there is also a center of excellence we just got funded in our university, where we could also explore such things if you want to collaborate in that regard. Thank you.
Okay, so that's the end of our lightning talk session now. So thanks everyone.
I think to give enough time for posters, we'll start the industry panel at 4:15. So we'll take an hour on the posters and